Welcome to Fear Spiral, the home of true midnight horror. Here we explore the most chilling, spine-tingling encounters on desolate Appalachian highways. Ghostly hitchhikers, vanishing truck stops, shadowy figures, and whispers in the fog that will make your heart race. Every story is told in first person just as it happened, or so the survivors say. So you can feel the fear, the isolation, and the dread as if you were there yourself. Tonight, we're taking you on a journey through 12 true-style horror encounters, each one scarier than the last. You'll witness terrifying figures lurking in the mist, abandoned places that seem alive, and radio voices from beyond the grave. These are the stories that truckers and night drivers tell in whispers, stories that haunt long after the headlights fade. If you love realistic, atmospheric horror, make sure to subscribe to Fear Spiral. Hit the like button and leave a comment letting us know which story terrified you the most. The fog is rolling in, the road is long, and the night has just begun. So buckle up and prepare to experience the fear that waits on every highway, in every shadow, and behind every turn. The hitchhiker on Route 33. I've been a long-haul trucker for over 10 years, driving the winding highways of Appalachia at all hours. I'd seen my share of strange things, wrecked cars in the fog, deer darting across the road, but nothing had ever shaken me like that night on Route 33. It was late October, around 2:30 a.m., the kind of cold where the fog hangs heavy over the valleys, making every shadow seem alive. I had just passed through a stretch of sparse forest between Marietta and Athens, Ohio. When I first noticed him, at first, I thought it was another lost traveler, a hitchhiker bundled in a thick jacket, standing at the edge of the shoulder. His thumb was out, tapping nervously against his palm. Normally, I don't pick up hitchhikers, I've heard too many stories, but something about the way he looked, almost desperate, made me slow down. My rig's headlights cut through the fog, illuminating him just long enough for me to notice his pale face, the hollow eyes staring back at me. I rolled down my window. "Hey, you need a ride?" I called, my voice echoing against the empty highway. He nodded, stepping closer. And that's when I noticed how silent the night had grown. Even the usual sounds of tires crunching gravel or distant owls seemed muted, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. I unlocked the passenger door and he climbed in without a word. At first, nothing seemed wrong. He didn't speak, just stared straight ahead. The air in the cab felt heavier than usual, the kind of chill that sinks under your skin no matter how warm the heater is. I tried to make small talk. "Long walk out here?" No response. Just that stare, vacant and cold. I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, catching glimpses of something off, his face almost too pale, his eyes reflecting the dim glow of the dashboard like they were wet glass. About 20 minutes in, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. Shadows flickered at the edge of the fog outside, though no trees should have been moving. Every time I looked directly, it was gone. I chalked it up to my imagination, or maybe the headlights playing tricks, but an unease was building in my chest. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. The cab smelled faintly of damp earth, like the forest itself had followed him in. Then he spoke. His voice was low, almost a rasp. "Don't look back," he said. Just 2 words, but the tone made my stomach drop. I froze, my eyes locked on the road, heart pounding. What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He just shook his head slightly, eyes still fixed on some invisible point behind me. I forced a laugh, trying to dismiss it. "You okay, man?" He didn't answer. The silence that followed was oppressive. Every mile felt slower, the fog thicker. Then I saw them, the figures. At first I thought they were trees, but they moved unnaturally, jerking across the road in rhythm with my heartbeat. I blinked and they were closer. Faces turned toward me, twisted in ways human faces shouldn't twist, glowing faintly in the mist. I slammed on the brakes, the rig skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. I turned to the passenger seat to tell him to get out, to tell myself I wasn't losing it, but he wasn't there. The seat was empty. My chest seized. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. No sign he had ever been in the cab. The radio, which had been dead for hours, crackled to life suddenly. A voice whispered, "He's here. He's always here." Static hissed in my ears. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely steer. I tried to accelerate, heart hammering, sweat cold on my back. Every shadow outside seemed to lunge at the headlights. Every sound, branches snapping, tires crunching gravel, felt amplified like the forest itself was hunting me. I kept driving, gripping the wheel, eyes darting to every side of the cab. Hours felt like minutes. Somewhere around 4:15 a.m., the fog began to thin, the figures vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. I pulled into a rest area, shaking, trying to calm down. I was alone. Completely alone. My coffee cup had tipped over on the dashboard, spilling its contents, but no one had been there to knock it. I called the company, told them what happened. They thought I was hallucinating, blamed fatigue. But I know what I saw. The hitchhiker, the shadows, the whispering voice. I've driven that stretch of Route 33 dozens of times since, in daylight and at night. Sometimes I see him standing at the same shoulder, thumb raised, just staring. And every time I feel the same chill that told me that night at 2:30 a.m. that he wasn't just a lost traveler. Some nights I wonder if he's waiting for the next trucker foolish enough to stop. And I can't help but glance in the passenger seat, half expecting him to climb in again. The truck stop that vanished. I'd been driving a loaded 18-wheeler through West Virginia's winding backroads for years, but nothing had prepared me for the night I took a wrong turn near Elkins. It was around 1:45 a.m. and the interstate had given way to narrow wooded highways with barely any signage. The fog was thick, clinging to the treetops, curling around the headlights like a living thing. I'd been on the road for hours, fatigue gnawing at my bones, and I was desperate for a coffee, a shower, anything that could shake the monotony of the endless dark. That's when I saw it. A faint glow in the distance, a cluster of lights that seemed to float above the road. I assumed it was a truck stop. I'd been through enough desolate stretches to know that an open rest area at this hour was a godsend. My rig slowed as I approached, the headlights cutting through the mist. As I got closer, something felt off. The lights weren't in the usual pattern, like neon signs or parking lot lamps. They were scattered, flickering, uneven, almost as if someone had strung bulbs along the tree line. I shrugged and chalked it up to exhaustion. Pulling into the lot, I noticed there were no other trucks, which was odd. At this hour, you'd at least expect one or two long haulers parked under the dim lights. The pavement was cracked, weeds growing in the gaps. The air smelled faintly of diesel and rot. I turned off my engine, hoping the caffeine would wake me up enough to navigate the next stretch safely. The building looked abandoned, paint peeling, windows dark. A faint humming noise came from somewhere inside, almost like a generator running in the distance. My footsteps echoed as I approached the entrance. I pushed the door. It creaked open. Inside, it was eerily quiet, but I could see shelves, empty snack racks, and an old coffee machine buzzing softly. I poured myself a cup, the bitter aroma cutting through the damp smell. I was about to leave when I noticed something on the floor, a pair of boots, caked in mud, facing the back hallway. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No response. Just the low hum of the machine and the faint drip of water somewhere behind the walls. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was just the fog messing with my senses. Then I heard it, a soft tapping like someone walking on the metal staircase behind the counter. I froze, my hands clutching the cup. "Who's there?" I said, voice tight. Silence. The tapping resumed, slow, deliberate. Each step echoed in the hollow building. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, thudding against the walls. I tried to convince myself it was a raccoon or maybe the old building settling. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked toward the back hallway, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating peeling wallpaper and broken tiles. That's when I saw the shadow, a tall figure standing at the end of the corridor, completely still, facing me. I could see its outline clearly, though there was no detail, no face, just a black void where a person should be. I froze, the flashlight shaking in my grip. I tried to speak. "Hey, I don't mean any—" The figure moved. Slowly, deliberately sliding sideways like it was gliding across the floor. My stomach dropped. I ran back to the door, fumbling with the handle, only to find it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at me. I pounded on the glass, yelling, hoping someone, anyone, would hear me. The tapping resumed, closer, faster, echoing like the figure was circling me. In desperation, I turned to the hallway, hoping to find another exit. That's when I noticed footprints appearing behind me, though I hadn't seen anyone move. Wet, muddy prints, stretching from the back hall to where I had stood moments ago, disappearing into the shadows. My mind screamed, telling me to get out, but the fear was paralyzing. I could feel its presence, like the air itself was heavier, colder, and impossible to breathe. I slammed my shoulder against the door one last time. Somehow it gave way and I stumbled into my truck, heart racing, sweat cold against my skin. I didn't stop the engine. I didn't even look back. I hit the road, tires spinning on the slick pavement, desperate to put distance between myself and that place. Hours later, when daylight broke, I tried to retrace my route, thinking maybe I'd just misremembered the turn. But when I got back to where the truck stop should have been, there was nothing. No cracked asphalt, no glowing lights, no building at all. Just the narrow highway stretching endlessly between trees, fog rolling off the hills. It was as if the rest stop had never existed. Since that night, I avoid that stretch completely. I drive miles out of the way if I have to, just to be safe. But sometimes late at night, when I'm stuck on some empty Appalachian backroad, I swear I see that faint glow, flickering between the trees, beckoning me. And for a moment, the hum of a coffee machine, the sound of tapping steps fills my cab, and I can't help but think, it's still waiting. The highway mirror. I've been driving trucks across Appalachia for nearly a decade. I'm used to isolation, foggy nights, and the occasional deer or raccoon darting across the road. But nothing prepared me for the night I saw my own reflection, or rather, what shouldn't have been in it. It was around 3:10 a.m. on a chilly November night. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Knoxville to Morgantown. The highway was deserted, as it usually is at that hour. The only sound, the low rumble of my engine and the faint whistle of the wind past the cab. Fog clung to the edges of the road, obscuring the trees on either side, turning the woods into an inky black wall. My rig's mirrors reflected only darkness, save for the faint glow of my own taillights in the rear view. About an hour into the drive, I stopped at a small pull-off to stretch. The heater had been cranked too high and I needed fresh air. As I climbed down, I noticed something odd in the side mirror. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fog, another truck perhaps, but the lot was empty. Then I realized what made it different. The reflection in the mirror didn't match my movements. I raised my hand to my jacket pocket. The figure in the mirror left its hand dangling at its side. My heartbeat jumped. Okay, just tired, I muttered. But the sense of wrongness didn't leave me. I climbed back in, trying to shake it off. I started the engine, pulling back onto the highway. My headlights cut through the fog in long, narrow beams, and I could feel the temperature in the cab dropping. It was colder than it should have been, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. Minutes later, the strange feeling returned. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the side mirror. A figure was standing behind my truck. At first, I thought it might be someone playing a prank, but as I slowed, there was no one there when I glanced directly. Just the mirror reflecting my rig and the empty, foggy asphalt behind me. Then I noticed it again. A shadow moving, not in the cab, not outside, but in the mirror itself. And this time it mimicked me in the worst way possible. Every time I turned my head, it lagged, delayed, almost like it was alive but slightly out of sync. My hands were gripping the wheel tight enough to whiten my knuckles. My heartbeat was deafening. I tried to ignore it, telling myself exhaustion was making me hallucinate. But the figure in the mirror smiled. Not a friendly smile. A slow curling grin that wasn't my own. The hair in the reflection fell differently. The eyes were darker, deeper, almost hollow. I swear I could feel it watching me. I yelled, "Who's there?" My voice cracked, echoing in the empty cab. The smile stretched wider in the mirror. The rig seemed heavier. The tires sticking to the asphalt as if the road itself had thickened. Panic clawed at me. I wanted to stop, to get out, but every instinct told me that stopping would make it worse. Then came the whisper. Faint at first, like the wind through the vents, but unmistakable. Drive. Don't look back. My entire body froze. The voice was mine, or at least it sounded exactly like it should. The figure in the mirror raised its hand, beckoning me forward. I slammed the rig into gear, accelerating through the foggy stretch. The entire highway seemed warped. Shadows flickered along the trees, shapes that weren't animals. Every time I glanced in the mirror, the figure was closer, though the road hadn't allowed anyone to get that near. My chest heaved. Sweat ran down my temples. The heater felt useless against the cold, unnatural chill pressing down on me. Finally, I reached a bend where the fog thinned. I dared a glance in the mirror, and it was gone. Just me, my rig, the empty highway. My breathing was ragged, and I could barely move my trembling hands from the wheel. I didn't stop until I reached the next rest area, heart hammering, every nerve screaming. I double-checked the rig, every corner, every mirror. Nothing. I told myself it was a hallucination, a combination of fatigue, fog, and the monotony of the drive. But even weeks later, I see it in my dreams. The mirror figure smiling at me, waiting. Sometimes I wake up and check the mirrors immediately, even when I'm home, and occasionally late at night I feel that same icy pressure in my chest like it's still there, in the fog somewhere behind me waiting for the next drive. The radio voice at mile marker 82. I've been driving trucks through the Appalachians for over a decade. I've dealt with fog, rain, wildlife, and the occasional reckless driver, but nothing had ever unsettled me like what happened near mile marker 82 on Route 119, West Virginia. It was 2:50 a.m. The highway was deserted, the glow of my headlights cutting through a thick mist that smelled faintly of wet pine and cold earth. I had been on the road for nearly 10 hours straight, hauling frozen goods to Pittsburgh, and I was desperate for some company, or at least noise, to keep myself awake. That's when I reached for the CB radio. Static greeted me as usual. I tried a few channels, but most were dead. Finally, a voice came through, faint, raspy, and almost drowned in static. "Driver, stop, now." I froze. The voice was eerily calm, but carried a sense of urgency that made my stomach knot. I tapped the microphone. "Say again? Who's this?" No answer, just the low hiss of static. I laughed nervously to myself. Probably some prankster on a nearby truck, or fatigue playing tricks. I shook my head and switched channels. Then it came again, clearer this time, almost whispering. "Stop. Before it sees you." I froze. My hands clenched the steering wheel. A cold sweat broke across my back. "What the hell?" I muttered, scanning the empty road ahead. The fog was thicker here, so dense I could barely see the line markings on the asphalt. My rig's engine seemed too loud in the heavy silence. Then I saw it, or thought I did. A shadow, standing in the middle of the highway, impossibly still. My headlights hadn't illuminated it fully, but I could sense a figure, tall, thin, and unnaturally motionless. I slammed the brakes, heart hammering, but when I glanced at the spot a second later, it was gone. "Just fog," the CB radio crackled again. "Driver, don't look back." The voice sounded almost like mine, but distorted, like it was underwater. My chest tightened. "Okay, that's enough," I muttered, hands trembling. I tried to accelerate, desperate to get past whatever it was, but the fog seemed to wrap around my rig, slowing me down. Then came the tapping. Light, rhythmic, like fingernails on metal. At first I thought it was loose cargo in the trailer, but it continued, synchronized with the radio voice, echoing in a way that made the cab feel smaller, like the walls were closing in. I could feel it behind me, moving with me, even though I dared not look into the mirrors. Panic set in. My heartbeat thundering, I muttered under my breath, This is insane." The CB radio static grew louder, forming a whispering chorus of voices now, all overlapping. "Stop. Turn. Don't." Every word sent a shiver down my spine. I could see the mist outside twisting unnaturally, forming shapes that looked like hands reaching for the truck. Somewhere between mile marker 82 and the next curve, I saw a pair of headlights in the distance. Relief flooded me. I wasn't alone. As I approached, though, I realized there was no road ahead for another vehicle. The lights floated slightly above the asphalt, swaying as if suspended in midair. I slammed my eyes shut for a second, and when I opened them, the lights were gone. The tapping turned into scraping, like claws dragging along metal. My rig shuddered, though I knew it wasn't mechanical. I could feel the cold air press in from all sides, as if the fog had weight, as if it had mass and intent. The radio went dead. Silence. My breathing was loud in the cab, my hands shaking. Then I heard it, a whispering from the cab itself, behind me, though no one was there. "You shouldn't have stopped. You shouldn't have slowed down." My vision blurred. I gripped the wheel, teeth clenched, trying to rationalize. I tried to convince myself it was sleep deprivation, some hallucination, but even now I can feel the residual fear, cold in my bones. I drove through the fog until the sun began to rise, until the woods returned to their normal stillness. When I finally stopped at a rest area near Fairmont, I checked the CB radio. Dead. Silent. No sign of any signal. And yet, The memory of that distorted, whispering voice lingers with me every time I drive late at night. I've avoided mile marker 82 since that night. Some say the road is cursed, that truckers have vanished there before me. I don't know if that's true. I only know what I heard, what I felt, the cold weight, the whispers, the tapping, and that voice pretending to be me, warning me, taunting me. Even now, sometimes I swear I hear faint static in my cab, even when I'm parked in my driveway, and I can't help but think, it's waiting for the next trucker to answer its call. The fog that followed me. I've been a trucker for over 12 years, and I've driven every back road and winding highway Appalachia has to offer. I thought I'd seen it all. Freak storms, deer collisions, abandoned cars. But nothing prepared me for the night the fog followed me. It was around 1:35 a.m. in late October. I was hauling a refrigerated load through the mountains of West Virginia, somewhere between Elkins and Buckhannon. The highway was narrow, winding and deserted, blanketed in fog that felt unusually thick, almost viscous, clinging to the asphalt and curling around my rig like a living thing. The heater was on full blast, but the chill seeped through the cab, wrapping around me. My headlights barely cut through the gray, turning the trees into monstrous silhouettes. I had just passed a sharp bend when I noticed it. A thick wall of fog had appeared behind me, creeping along the road as though it were alive, moving faster than the natural wind should allow. My gut tightened. I checked the mirrors. Nothing unusual at first, just the reflection of the empty road. But then I saw shadows in the fog, darker than the rest, forming shapes that seemed humanoid. I rubbed my eyes. Fatigue, probably, but even then a shiver ran down my spine. The radio crackled faintly. I reached over, thinking maybe someone was calling on the CB. The voice was raspy, almost drowned in static. "Don't stop, or it will get you." I froze, gripping the wheel tighter. My heart was thudding like a jackhammer. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking. Silence, only the hum of the engine and the whisper of the fog outside. I tried to speed up, shaking off the panic. The fog seemed to follow me, rolling along the curves, stretching across the asphalt like it had weight. My headlights lit up the white mist ahead, and for a moment I thought I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. I swerved instinctively, heart hammering, only to find the road empty. The fog had swallowed whatever it was. My breathing became shallow, every muscle tensed. The cab smelled of diesel, rubber, and something faintly metallic like blood, but I knew I hadn't hit anything. The fog pressed against the windshield as though trying to seep inside. My rig felt heavier, slower, like something was pushing from behind. I kept looking in the mirrors, and that's when I saw them. Faces forming in the fog, not human exactly. Just pale, hollow, staring with eyes that reflected no light. They lingered at the edge of the headlights, vanishing when I blinked. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, that I was exhausted, but then came the scratching, on the trailer, on the metal walls behind me. It wasn't the sound of wind or loose cargo. It was deliberate, methodical, growing louder, closer. My hands shook. Come on," I muttered, trying to stay calm. I sped up, heart hammering, eyes darting to every shadow in the mirrors. Somewhere near a steep bend, I noticed a figure walking along the side of the road. Tall, thin, draped in what looked like a tattered cloak. No features, just a black silhouette gliding through the fog. I slammed my foot on the gas. The fog thickened immediately, as though trying to swallow the headlights. The figure stayed there, moving in tandem with me, never advancing, never retreating. Panic clawed at me. I screamed into the night, "What do you want from me?" The fog swirled violently, the cab filled with the metallic smell again, stronger this time, making my stomach churn. The radio crackled again, my own voice came through, distorted and slowed. "Stop, or it takes you." My chest tightened. Cold sweat poured down my face. I knew I couldn't stop. Stopping meant death or worse. I kept driving, every nerve screaming, until the fog finally thinned near a small clearing. My hands were white on the wheel, shaking uncontrollably. I glanced in the mirrors, empty. Nothing behind me but the tail end of the fog, lingering like smoke from a distant fire. My breath came in ragged gasps. I didn't slow until I reached a lit truck stop near Buckhannon. I tried to explain to the night clerk what happened. He just shook his head, offering a weak smile. "Mountains play tricks on drivers at night. Fog gets thick. You probably just got spooked." I nodded, not wanting to argue. But I know what I saw. The fog had been alive. It had been following me, watching, testing me. Even now, months later, I avoid that stretch of highway whenever possible. Some nights, when the mist creeps in through the mountains, I swear I can see it, rolling over the asphalt, creeping between trees, waiting for the next trucker foolish enough to drive through it at 1:35 a.m. I still dream about that night, about the faces in the fog, about the whispering voice that sounded just like me. And when I wake up sometimes, I feel the chill in my cab, even when I'm parked in my driveway. The rest stop that wasn't there. I've been trucking through the Appalachian backroads for more than a decade. I know the highways like the back of my hand, the twists, the curves, and the spots where deer suddenly appear out of nowhere. But one night a few months ago, I experienced something I can't explain, and it still haunts me every time I think about it. It was around 2:20 a.m. on a rainy October night. I had been hauling refrigerated cargo from Charleston, West Virginia to Morgantown, and the rain had been steady for hours, turning the asphalt slick and reflective. The windshield wipers worked overtime, but the foggy mist that clung to the road and the tree line made visibility almost zero. I was exhausted, caffeine barely holding back my eyelids, and my thoughts drifted toward finding a place to stop. A rest area, a gas station, anything. That's when I saw it. A glowing cluster of lights just ahead, like a welcome beacon through the rain. I assumed it was a rest stop. I slowed, relieved, and pulled into what I thought was the parking lot. The asphalt was wet, reflecting the yellow glow of overhead lamps. But as I rolled to a stop, I noticed something strange. No other vehicles. Not even another truck, not even a car. Just me and the lights. I got out, stretching, trying to wake myself up. The smell of wet pine mixed with asphalt filled my lungs. The lot was oddly quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound, my footsteps, the tapping of my boots, echo unnaturally. I approached the building, expecting the usual small convenience store or payphone area. It wasn't there. I blinked, looking around. The lights were real. Overhead lamps hung from poles, but the building itself had vanished. There was nothing but the empty parking lot, puddles reflecting the lamps and the rain hitting the asphalt in steady, hypnotic taps. I walked toward where the building should have been. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt, like the fog itself was pressing against my chest. Then I heard it, a soft whispering from behind me, almost drowned by the rain. "Driver!" My heart jumped into my throat. I spun around. Nothing, just the fog, the empty lot, and the glow of the lamps. My hands shook. "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer, only silence. The rain pattered against my jacket, but the air felt strangely cold and thick, almost metallic. I ran back to the cab, trying to shake off the dread gnawing at me. As I climbed inside, I noticed footprints in the wet asphalt. They weren't mine. They started near the spot where the building should have been and trailed toward the foggy edge of the lot. I held my breath. My hands were slick with rain as I gripped the steering wheel. My heartbeat was deafening. I tried to start the engine, nothing. The lights on the dashboard flickered once, twice. The hum of the rig felt unnervingly loud, echoing in the quiet night. Then the fog moved. Slowly, deliberately, rolling over the edges of the lot like it had mass and intent. I swore I saw figures moving inside it, tall, thin and indistinct like shadows given shape. I slammed the starter again. The engine roared to life. I hit the gas, tires spinning in the wet lot, trying to escape. The highway returned just as abruptly as I'd left it. One moment I was surrounded by the foggy parking lot. The next I was back on the road, rain still falling, asphalt slick under the tires. I glanced in the mirrors, empty. No lights, no figures, nothing. The building hadn't existed. I told the company what happened. They laughed it off. "Just fatigue," they said. "Fog, rain, tired eyes. Happens to the best of us." But I know what I saw. The lights were real. The lot was real. And the whispers. They were real. I could feel them, pressing against my chest, lingering like smoke in the cab. Since that night, I avoid that stretch entirely, even in daylight. But every time I drive in the mountains at night, my mind drifts back to that rest stop that wasn't there. Sometimes when the fog is thick and the rain hits the asphalt just right, I swear I can see the glow of those lamps in the distance, waiting for the next driver foolish enough to pull in, and I wonder, what would have happened if I'd stayed a second longer? The woman in the ditch. I'd been running night loads for nearly 15 years when it happened. By then I'd grown used to Appalachia's rhythm. The way fog rolls like breath through the hollers. The way the forest presses so close you feel watched. Still, what I saw off Route 52 outside Bluefield one February night has never left me. It was a Thursday about 3:05 a.m., cold enough that the damp air cut straight through the seams of my jacket. I'd been hauling drywall since sundown, a long stretch through tunnels and switchbacks. The radio was low, the heater rattling. Outside, the moon was just a dull blur behind cloud and mist. The world looked drained of color. That's when my headlights picked up movement at the edge of the highway. A woman, barefoot, wearing a pale dress soaked dark halfway up her thighs, was standing in the ditch waving. At first I thought she was hurt, maybe from a wreck. Her hair hung in tangled ropes and she was shaking, one arm raised as if trying to flag me down. I slowed. The road curved tight there, and stopping a rig that size is no small thing, but something about the way she moved, stumbling, desperate, hit a nerve. I eased onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking through the fog. Steam hissed from the brakes. When I climbed down, the night closed in, thick and wet. "Ma'am," I called. My voice bounced off the trees. She didn't answer, just stood there, trembling. "You all right? You hurt?" She finally turned toward me, and for a second the fog cleared enough for the headlights to catch her face. Her skin looked almost gray, lips blue, eyes wide and glassy like she'd been out there for hours. She whispered something I couldn't hear over the hiss of the rain. I took a cautious step closer. "You in an accident?" She shook her head slowly, water dripping from her hair. "He's still in there," she said. Her voice was soft, cracked. "Who?" She pointed behind me, back toward the trees. I turned. The beam from the truck's lights didn't reach far, but I could see the guardrail twisted open where something large must have gone through. Below that, down the embankment, lay the shattered glint of metal. My stomach dropped. "All right," I said. "I'll call it in." When I looked back toward her, she was gone. Just gone. No sound of movement, no footprints in the wet mud. I ran a flashlight over the ditch, over the road. Nothing but rain and fog. I swallowed hard, heart pounding, and slid down the embankment toward the wreck. It was an old sedan, front end crushed against a tree. Steam curled from the hood. The air smelled of antifreeze and iron. Inside, through the cracked window, I saw him. A man slumped over the wheel, lifeless. I reached for my phone, hands slick. No service. Not a single bar. My breath fogged the glass as I tried to see if he was breathing. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, squelching in the mud. "Ma'am?" I called. Silence. The footsteps stopped right behind me. I turned the light, and there she was again, standing barely 10 feet away, her soaked dress clinging to her like second skin. She was staring at the wreck, not at me. Her lips moved, whispering, "He's cold." "I know," I said, forcing my voice steady. "I'll get help." She looked at me then, really looked, eyes hollow, bottomless, and whispered, "You can't." My flashlight flickered. The air around me felt heavy, thick enough to choke. The woman stepped closer, rain running down her face like tears. I stumbled backward, slipped in the mud, looked up, and she was gone again. The forest went silent. Not a single drop of rain hit the leaves. Even the hum of my idling truck faded like someone had turned a dial. The only sound left was the slow creak of metal from the wreck below. I scrambled up the slope, boots sliding, lungs burning. When I reached the shoulder, my rig's headlights flickered twice, then steadied. I drove until dawn without stopping. When I hit the next service station, I called the state police and told them there'd been a crash on Route 52. They said they'd send a unit. A few hours later, an officer called me back. "There's no recent wreck out there," he said. "That guardrail's been fixed for years." I insisted. Told him about the woman, the car, the man inside. He paused a long time before saying quietly, "You're not the first driver to report that. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want them. Even now, when I pass that stretch, I slow without meaning to. Every time fog settles low and the trees crowd close, I catch myself watching the ditches, half expecting to see her, barefoot, soaked, waving, her eyes pleading for someone to stop. And I pray that whoever does won't make the mistake I did and climb down into the dark. The radio that talked back. I was hauling an empty flatbed through the Appalachians somewhere between Knoxville and Beckley when the mountains swallowed my signal. It was around 2:45 a.m. and the night was pitch black except for my headlights slicing through the mist. The CB radio had been my only company for hours. Static, snippets of trucker chatter, and the occasional lonely gospel station cutting through the fuzz. That night, even the static sounded strange, thin, whispery, like something alive was moving through it. I'd been driving since sunset, eyelids heavy, the road ahead twisting through dense forest and steep drops. Every few miles the fog thickened, rising like smoke off the asphalt. I was supposed to make Beckley by dawn, but my gut told me to pull over and rest. I'd passed no lights, no motels, no signs of life in almost 30 miles. Just endless dark. Then from the CB, a faint voice crackled through the static. Breaker. Breaker. Anyone on Highway 19? I reached for the mic, grateful for a voice. Copy that. This is Silverhound westbound. You out there? The channel hissed, silent for a second. Then, you shouldn't stop. The voice was flat, male, with a slow drawl that didn't sound quite right. Too calm. What was that? I asked. Who's this? Don't stop, he said again, quieter this time. He walks there at night. My heart gave a slow, uneasy beat. He who? No reply. Just the soft, rhythmic pop of static. I tried another channel. Dead. Another. Dead. I turned the radio off and on again. The voice was gone. The only sound left was the hum of the tires and the soft patter of rain. 15 minutes later, the fog got so thick I could barely see the yellow lines. I slowed, hunched forward, scanning for any safe place to pull over. And then, like a miracle, I saw a turnout up ahead, a gravel shoulder with a flickering street lamp. I parked, shut down the engine, and let the quiet settle. It wasn't long before I realized how wrong that quiet was. No crickets, no wind, not even the sound of rain anymore. The only noise was the faint hiss from my radio. Even though I'd turned it off, I leaned closer. The speaker crackled softly, then a voice whispered, so faint I almost missed it. You stopped. My throat went dry. The hairs on my arms lifted. I reached for the radio, but my hand froze when I saw the dials turning by themselves. Slowly, deliberately, the channel light flickered red, then green, and then the voice returned. Louder this time. Get back in the truck. I was already inside. Who the hell is this? I snapped. No answer. Just breathing. Deep, slow breathing. Then faintly under it something else. Footsteps. Crunching gravel. My stomach dropped. I turned the headlights on. The fog swallowed everything beyond the glow. I could barely see 5 feet ahead, but I heard them. Steps circling the truck, slow and deliberate. Who's out there? I shouted, trying to sound brave. Silence. Then the breathing again, closer now, coming from the radio. I grabbed the mic. Listen, this isn't funny. A sharp crack burst through the speaker, loud enough to make me drop it. Then beneath the static, a man's voice whispered right against my ear. Look in the mirror. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I turned my head slowly toward the side mirror. At first, all I saw was my own reflection in the fog swirling behind me. Then something moved. A tall, pale shape standing just beyond the glow of my brake lights. It wasn't a man. It was too long, too still. It just stood there facing me. No face I could make out, just the faint outline of a head and shoulders. I hit the ignition. The truck roared to life, gears grinding as I threw it into drive. Gravel spat out behind me as I tore back onto the road. My pulse thundered in my ears. The radio kept hissing, alive again. You shouldn't have stopped, the voice said. I didn't mean to, I shouted. You all stop eventually, it said softly. Then, almost gently, but you're still breathing. For now. I yanked the radio cord out of the socket and tossed it onto the passenger seat. But even disconnected, it kept whispering. Faintly. The voice mumbling words I couldn't understand. I didn't stop again until dawn broke over the ridges. When I finally pulled into a truck stop, I threw the radio in the trash and sat outside with a coffee, shaking so bad I spilled most of it. The clerk noticed and asked if I was okay. I told him what happened, half expecting him to laugh. Instead, he went pale. Buddy, he said, there ain't been radio service through that stretch in years. Tower burned down after a wreck in '09. Driver died out there on a foggy night trying to call for help. I didn't ask for his name. I didn't want to know. That night, when I got back on the road with a new radio, I swore I'd keep it off through the mountains. But sometimes, even now, when the fog's thick and the world's gone quiet, I swear I can still hear a voice faintly through the static. Breaker. Breaker. Anyone still breathing? The hitchhiker in the rain. I've been on the road most of my life. Started trucking when I was 21, and I've seen a lot of strange things along Appalachian highways. Deer that dart from nowhere. Fog so thick it looks like smoke. Empty towns that feel like they're holding their breath. But one night, just after 2:30 a.m., I picked up someone I shouldn't have, and I've never stopped regretting it. It was mid-November, cold enough to see my breath inside the cab. I'd been driving all night through a stretch of Route 23 that cuts between dense forest and steep ridges. Rain had been hammering down for hours, and the kind that makes the road shine like glass. My wipers were slapping steady, hypnotic, and I was running low on coffee and patience. Then I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder, half in the ditch, thumb out. A tall man in a dark coat, rain running down his hair, his arm motionless. I don't usually stop. No trucker with half a brain does that at night in the middle of nowhere. But something about him hit me hard. He looked soaked to the bone, desperate. Maybe it was guilt or fatigue or just human instinct, but I pulled over. The guy climbed up into the cab without a word. He was shivering so bad I could hear his teeth clack. I cranked the heat. "Rough night, huh?" I said. He nodded slowly. "Been walking a long time." His voice was hoarse, quiet. I tried small talk. "Where you headed?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared out the windshield, watching the rain streak the glass. Finally he said, "North. Past the bridge." There was no bridge for miles. Not on that route, at least not one I knew about. But I didn't press it. We drove in silence for a while, the rain beating a rhythm against the roof. The engine's low hum filling the space between us. Every so often I'd glance at him. His hands were folded tight in his lap, skin pale, veins dark like ink under the surface. His coat looked old, worn with patches of mud crusted up to the sleeves. Then something weird happened. The radio, which I'd left on low for background noise, began picking up static. Loud, violent static that rose and fell like breathing. I reached for the dial. The hitchhiker spoke without looking at me. "Don't change it." His voice was calm, too calm. I froze. "Why?" He didn't answer. Just stared ahead, eyes fixed on the road. The static shifted, and for a second I thought I heard something under it. Not voices exactly, but a low moaning sound, like wind moving through a tunnel. The air in the cab felt heavier, colder. I glanced at the clock. 2:46 a.m. The rain was coming down harder now, thunder rolling somewhere far off in the hills. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. They never found the others. I turned toward him. "What?" He looked at me for the first time. His eyes were dark and flat, like there was nothing behind them. "The bridge," he said softly. "They never pulled them out." I slowed the truck. "Buddy, what bridge are you talking about?" He smiled, barely. A small, crooked thing that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll see." That's when I realized how cold it had gotten inside the cab. My breath was fogging the air again. The windows started to frost from the inside, even though the heat was on full blast. I glanced back at the road and froze. Up ahead, through the downpour, I saw a bridge stretching across a black ravine, its guardrails twisted, mangled. There shouldn't have been a bridge there. I'd driven this route hundreds of times. There was no bridge. The man beside me whispered, "Slow down." I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed to keep driving, to push through, but something about his voice made me obey. The truck crept forward, tires splashing through puddles. Halfway across, I heard it. A deep creaking like metal under strain. Then faintly from somewhere below, a sound that didn't belong to the wind or rain. Screaming. I slammed the brakes. "What the hell is this?" I shouted. The hitchhiker turned his head toward me. Rainwater dripped from his hair even though he'd been inside for nearly 20 minutes. His lips moved, and I'll never forget what he said. "You should have left me there." Then, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. Just gone. The passenger seat was empty, soaked as if someone had poured water all over it. The truck shuddered violently, lights flickering. I hit the gas and tore across that bridge like the devil himself was behind me. When I finally looked back in the mirror, the bridge wasn't there anymore. Just a stretch of winding road and fog trailing off into darkness. I didn't sleep that morning. When I reached the way station at dawn, I told another driver what happened. He stared at me for a long moment and said quietly, "There was a flood out there years ago. Bridge collapsed in the middle of the night. Whole family went down with their car. Folks say sometimes a man still walks that stretch trying to get back home. I laughed it off, tried to, but my hands were shaking so bad I spilled my coffee. I still take that route sometimes, though I never stop for anyone, no matter how bad the rain gets. But every once in a while, when the wipers squeak across the glass and the road curves through the mist, I catch a glimpse in the side mirror, a figure standing in the ditch, arm raised, thumb out, and every time, I hear his voice again, faint but clear. Through the hum of the engine and the rain, they never found the others. The man beside my truck. I've hauled freight through the Appalachian backroads for years, long enough to know that some nights you just don't stop. There's something about those mountain roads after midnight, the way fog clings to the pavement, the way the trees seem to lean closer, the way silence feels alive. But what happened to me one night outside Beckley still wakes me up in a cold sweat. It was early March, maybe around 1:55 a.m., and I was running a solo night haul from Bristol to Clarksburg. Light rain had just started, tapping gently against the windshield, and the highway ahead was empty for miles. My headlights cut through the mist in long silver beams, and the rhythmic hum of the tires was starting to lull me into that half-sleep truckers know too well. I needed a break. So when I saw an old pull-off area, a wide patch of cracked asphalt near a cluster of dead trees, I figured I'd stop for 10 minutes, stretch my legs, and get some air. There were no lights, no signs, just the glow of my parking lamps bleeding into the fog. I killed the engine, climbed down, and immediately noticed how quiet it was. Not just peaceful quiet, the heavy, suffocating kind that makes your ears ring. No crickets, no wind, not even the faint hiss of rain. Just nothing. I stood there smoking, watching my breath drift through the mist. The truck's running lights glowed faintly orange through the fog, reflecting off the wet ground. Everything felt still, too still. Then I heard it, a crunch of gravel, slow, deliberate, coming from behind the trailer. My first thought was another driver pulling in, maybe looking for a place to rest, but I hadn't heard another engine for at least half an hour. I flicked my cigarette into the mud and listened. Another step, closer. I called out, "Hey, you all right back there?" No answer, just that awful silence swallowing everything again. I grabbed my flashlight from the cab and walked along the side of the trailer, the beam slicing through the fog. The smell of wet pine was thick, and the air had that strange metallic chill that always comes before snow. I reached the back of the trailer and swung the light around, empty, no one there. The gravel was wet but undisturbed. Not a single footprint. I exhaled, tried to laugh it off. Maybe I'd imagined it. Long hours and no sleep can play tricks on your ears. I turned to head back to the cab, and froze, because someone was standing right beside the driver's door. He wasn't there a second ago. Just a tall, thin silhouette outlined against the dim glow of the parking lights. His clothes were soaked, hanging heavy on him, and his head was tilted slightly toward the cab window like he was looking inside. For a second, I thought maybe he needed help. Someone stranded or drunk. "Hey!" I shouted, voice cracking. "You okay, man?" He didn't move. Didn't even twitch. The fog drifted between us, soft and ghost-like, but I could make out his face just enough to know something was wrong. His skin looked too pale, too smooth, almost reflective in the dim light. His mouth hung open slightly like he was whispering something I couldn't hear. Then I realized the truck's headlights were off. I'd turned them off when I stopped. But there was still light shining on him, a dim, bluish glow from somewhere above. I looked up. Nothing but fog and darkness. When I looked back down, he was gone, just gone. I ran to the cab, heart hammering, slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. The dashboard flickered to life, gauges dancing wildly for a moment before settling. That's when I saw him again, standing in the mirror. Just behind the trailer, half shrouded by fog, head tilted the same way like he was listening. I hit the gas, gravel spraying out behind me as I tore back onto the road. The trailer rattled over potholes and the engine roared, but all I could think about was that shape in the mirror. I didn't slow down until I reached the next truck stop 30 miles north. My hands were still trembling when I parked. I climbed out, walked a full circle around the rig, half expecting to see footprints or mud streaks. Nothing. I went inside, ordered a coffee, and tried to calm down. The cashier, a middle-aged guy with a friendly drawl, asked if I was all right. I told him I thought someone had been following me back down the road. He stopped smiling. "You didn't pull off near that old service lot, did you?" I froze. "Yeah, why?" He lowered his voice. "That place burned down in the 90s. Driver died in his cab. Engine caught fire while he was sleeping. Folks around here say sometimes you'll see him standing beside trucks on foggy nights like he's trying to get in." I wanted to laugh, to call it a stupid ghost story, but my throat wouldn't work. I just nodded, left my coffee half full, and went back to the lot. The fog had followed me. It pooled thick around the tires, curling along the asphalt like it had weight. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors again, and sat there listening. For a long time there was nothing. Then, faintly from outside, a soft tap on the driver's door. I didn't move. Didn't even breathe. The tapping came again. Slow. Steady. I gripped the wheel, eyes fixed forward, praying for sunrise. When daylight finally broke, I looked. There were no footprints. No handprints. Just a thin layer of condensation on the glass, and in the center of it the faint outline of a palm pressed against the window. The truck stop with no name. It was one of those nights where the rain never stops. A cold, endless downpour that blurs everything into gray. I was headed north through the Appalachian foothills, somewhere between Pikeville and Charleston, trying to make up time on a delayed load. My GPS had lost signal miles ago, but I wasn't worried. I knew those backroads better than most, or at least I thought I did. By the time the clock hit 3:12 a.m., my eyelids were getting heavy. The fog was so thick it looked alive, creeping along the road in long, twisting shapes. I hadn't seen another pair of headlights in hours. I was running on caffeine and static-filled country radio when I saw it. A faint neon glow through the mist. A truck stop. I almost laughed in relief. The sign was flickering badly, only half lit, but I could make out the word diner in buzzing red letters and the vague shape of a fuel canopy. I slowed, blinkers clicking in the quiet, and turned in. The first thing I noticed was that there were no other trucks. Not one. Just my rig, the puddles, and the steady patter of rain. But everything looked new, clean asphalt, shiny fuel pumps. Even the windows of the diner gleamed under the buzzing lights. I parked, killed the engine, and stepped out. The rain hit my jacket in cold, heavy drops. The air smelled like wet earth and diesel, normal enough. But underneath that was something faintly sweet, almost like perfume. I walked toward the diner. Through the big glass windows I could see someone behind the counter. A woman, maybe in her 50s, with pale hair pulled into a bun. She was wiping down the counter, humming softly. When I pushed the door open, a small bell jingled. The warmth hit me like a wave, along with the smell of fresh coffee and pancakes. "Welcome, honey," the woman said, smiling. Her voice was gentle, slow, the kind of voice you want to hear after a long night. "Cold out there." "Freezing," I said. "You folks open late, huh?" She chuckled. "Always." "Sit anywhere you like." I slid into a booth by the window, rain streaking the glass beside me. The vinyl squeaked under me, spotless and red. The whole place looked like it had been frozen in time. Chrome fixtures, old Coca-Cola signs, a jukebox in the corner. A little too clean, maybe. No dust, no wear, no sound except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. The waitress poured me coffee and smiled again. "On the house, sugar?" "Thanks," I said, wrapping my hands around the mug. It was warm, real. She turned and walked back behind the counter. I took a sip, bitter, strong, perfect. For the first time that night, I felt okay. Then the jukebox clicked on by itself. The music that came out was warped, old, like something from a record played too slow. A man's voice singing softly. Words I couldn't make out, but the melody was wrong. Off-key, dragging like something meant to sound human but not quite managing it. I glanced toward the counter. The waitress was gone. The coffee cup in my hands had gone cold. I stood slowly. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded small in the empty diner. No answer. The lights began to flicker. I turned toward the window and nearly dropped the cup. Outside, in the reflection of the glass, the parking lot wasn't empty anymore. There were trucks, dozens of them. Old rigs covered in rust, their headlights dim and yellow. And inside them, silhouettes, shapes sitting motionless behind the wheels. I spun around to look directly, but the lot was empty again. Just my truck in the fog. The doorbell jingled softly. I looked back. The waitress was standing by the counter again, smiling. But something was wrong. Her skin looked too pale now, almost gray. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. When she spoke, her voice came out wrong, layered like two people talking at once. You should have kept driving. Every hair on my neck stood up. What? You don't stop here after midnight, she whispered. Then her mouth opened wider, too wide, stretching until it split at the corners. And from inside her throat came the same warped song from the jukebox. Louder now, echoing through the diner. I stumbled backward, crashing into a booth, and bolted for the door. When I hit the lot, the air felt different, dry, cold, and completely still. The neon sign was gone. The diner was gone. I was standing in the middle of an empty lot, weeds pushing through cracked asphalt, a collapsed canopy rusting nearby. My truck sat alone, lights dim, surrounded by nothing but fog. I climbed in, locked the doors, and drove without looking back. My GPS flickered to life 15 minutes later. No listing for any diner or truck stop within 30 miles. A week later, I told another driver about it at a rest area. He went quiet for a long moment before saying, "My uncle used to talk about a place like that. Said it burned down in the 70s. Killed everyone inside, truckers, waitress, all of them. Some folks say it still shows up on foggy nights, only for drivers who've been on the road too long. I don't know what I believe. But sometimes when I'm driving through that stretch and the fog starts to roll in, I swear I catch a faint red glow in the distance, the flicker of a neon sign, and I keep driving, always driving." The Voice on Channel 19. It was late November, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes every breath sting. I'd been driving since sundown, hauling a load of lumber out of Tennessee toward Roanoke, cutting through the old Appalachian routes that twist and climb like veins through the mountains. It was 2:47 a.m. when it started. Most truckers know the quiet that comes after midnight, that hollow kind of silence where even the hum of the road feels like it's listening. I had my CB radio on, Channel 19 as always, just for company. Sometimes you catch chatter from other drivers, sometimes nothing but static. That night, though, the static started to move. At first it was just a faint hiss, then a whisper, like the sound of someone breathing too close to the mic. "Breaker 19, I said, leaning toward the radio. "Anybody out there tonight?" "Nothing." I shrugged it off, took a sip of coffee, kept rolling through the fog. The road narrowed, the trees pressed close. My headlights caught the shine of wet branches and the flash of my own reflection in road signs. That's when I heard it again. Only this time it wasn't static. It was a voice. Faint, female, whispering. "Can you hear me?" I froze, hand hovering over the mic. The voice was clear but thin, like it was coming from a long way off. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Who's this?" No answer. Just that soft crackling sound again, like breath. I reached to turn the dial, but the voice came back. Louder now. "Don't stop." The words hit me like a punch. I looked around the cab, half expecting to see someone in the passenger seat. "Who is this?" I asked again. Silence. The road curved sharply to the right, and I caught sight of an old sign half covered in moss. "Dead Man's Curve, 1 mile." I'd heard the stories. Drivers said the stretch was cursed. Bad brakes, fog, ghosts. All that trucker folklore you laugh about at rest stops. Only now, with that voice still crackling faintly in the CB, I wasn't laughing. When I hit the curve, I slowed to 25. The fog was thick as milk, swirling in the beams of my headlights. My tires hissed on the wet pavement. And then, someone whispered again right through the radio. "Don't stop." I didn't even realize my foot had come off the gas until my speedometer dipped. I pressed back down harder. My pulse was thudding so hard I could feel it in my temples. The CB went quiet for a long time, just the low hum of static. I was trying to shake it off when something stepped into my headlights. It was a woman, pale, barefoot, wearing what looked like a torn white nightgown, soaked through by rain. She was standing dead center in the lane, her hair hanging wet across her face. I slammed the brakes and jerked the wheel, the rig fishtailed, tires screaming, lights slicing through fog. When I stopped, my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear. The woman was gone. I jumped out of the cab, flashlight in hand, scanning the road. The air was icy, full of wet pine and the smell of burning rubber. but there was no one there. Then from behind me, through the CB still on in the cab, I heard her voice again. "You stopped." I spun and stared into the cab window. The radio light was glowing red. I climbed back inside, slamming the door behind me, every nerve in my body shaking. "Who are you?" I said, almost shouting. No answer. Just that same hiss broken by little bursts of sound like someone trying to speak through water. Then just as I was about to turn it off, the voice said clear as day, "I died here." The radio popped. The light flickered once, then went dead. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain hit the roof. When I finally got the courage to move again, I drove the rest of that stretch with my hands shaking on the wheel. It wasn't until I stopped at a fuel station near Roanoke, just as dawn was breaking, that I told another driver what had happened. He got quiet, real quiet, then said, "You were on Dead Man's Curve last night?" "Yeah," he nodded slowly. "They say a woman used to live near there. Husband was a driver. One night he missed the curve and went off the ravine. She went out looking for him, barefoot in the rain. They found her 3 days later. She'd slipped trying to climb down. Every few years, drivers say she calls out on the CB. Same words every time." I didn't say much after that. Just filled up my tank and left. I still drive those roads. Still keep Channel 19 on. Though most nights it's nothing but static and lonely chatter. But every once in a while, when the fog rolls thick and the road gets quiet, I hear it again. A faint whisper under the noise. Don't stop. And I never do. Never again.